Welcome to the Not Just Waiting podcast. I'm your host, Rihanna Hoffman, and this is a space for women learning to wait well and live fully. Whether you're in the middle of uncertainty, transition, or just figuring out what's next, this podcast is here to remind you are not behind, not forgotten, and definitely not just waiting. Let's dig into truth, grow in courage, and hold on to hope together. Hey friends, welcome back to the Not Just Waiting podcast. Today I'm joined by Emily Vermeer, an ambitious daughter of the King, devoted wife, and mama of two. Emily is the heart behind Fueled by Faith, a community created for women who long for deeper faith, authentic connection, and intentional growth. She's passionate about creating spaces where women can truly encounter God, lead with confidence, and live out their purpose right where they are. Emily carries both vision and warmth, and her heart for helping women grow in faith while embracing their calling is such a gift. I know this conversation will encourage you to keep pursuing Jesus boldly in every season. Let's dive in. I am so glad you're here, and I'm so glad that I get to introduce you to Emily. I stumbled upon Emily on the internet. Are we surprised? No. But we have some mutual people that do things together. And I'm like, oh, she's so cool. And I've honestly probably been following you for over a year at this point, maybe two. Yeah. And I'm like, she would be great on our podcast. And you very graciously said yes. And I'm loving it. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the ask. I'm so excited. And same. I feel like we've been in the same circle of people. And so it's really cool how God works in that. And I'm excited for this.
I love it. And I cannot wait. So if you're okay with it, we're going to jump right in.
Let's go.
So my first question for you is, who do you sense God has been forming you into in this season, especially in ways that weren't visible or celebrated?
I love this question so much because God does so much work on us that outwardly people don't see. And I feel like a lot of times comparison can creep in and people think that we're always this all the time, but they don't see the dedication or the heart posture or the literal crushing that happens in order to get where God has called us to. And a lot of where God is pulling me into now is a lot of dying to myself and my flesh of who I thought I was going to be at this age and this stage of my life. I I grew up kind of living up to others' expectations of me. I was a great box checker and I wanted to please everybody and do what everyone else expected of me. Um, and that slowly reversed as I started getting closer with the Lord. And particularly in this season, I'm such a go-getter and I'm I see a problem and I fix it. That is my personality. And God has very much humbled me in this season of what it's like to live under righteous order. And as being a woman who is ambitious and on fire for the Lord and kind of grew up in that boss babe mentality of if it's not happening, I got to do it myself. And this go girl attitude that can go towards a feministic viewpoint of really going back to the true development of the purpose behind God creating women and wives and understanding order and where I was operating out of order and taking ownership and how that kind of long story shorts of how that impacts everything else. Like when we're not operating in alignment, that overflows into all that we do. And so I've been really learning how to be, I know some people hate this word, but a submissive wife and to sit back and be led instead of leading, which is leadership in itself too, in some aspects. And it can be really difficult when you've operated in such a go-getter mentality. And it's also been I was kind of praised in that growing up of being the
Mhm.
first to complete a master's program in my family, be the first to start a business, be the first to do this, and it was kind of celebrated
Yeah.
in that, to now be like, "Actually, I have to consult my husband first." And people are like, "What? Who are you?" And, that's how God's created me to be, and it's been so beautiful to step back, not only to, like, even see my husband step into this role, but to showcase our kids and other people of, like, this is the design and living unto that, for the Lord, and it's so opposite of our culture, and so people don't see that because it's happening within these walls, right?
Mhm.
And so when I go outside of these walls and then I have to tell people, well, we have to discuss that. That's a financial investment that you're asking of me, and it's not just my money. What? I thought you made your own money and da 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 da, you know what I mean? And so to bring that back, so that's really where God's kind of beating down that self-idolatry and the well, I built this and I made this and the me of actually it's all mine. You are mine, and you're also his, your husband's. And then that comes back to my family and then that ripple effect. So that's really where God has been getting me back into alignment of not being so focused on the world and even my gifts and what that can do for the world of like if the ministry is not happening in the home, how is it valid out there? And so it's very, but people don't know that if they're not in here, you know?
Uh-huh.
And so, they can see the fruit on the outside, but is that fruit good fruit? If you were to come into my home, if there was a video recorder that was on me, would you be able to see that happening here? And that's kind of my mentality too of how I've been processing that and how I've been like, "Oh man, our flesh is really rising up in this to really convict me to come back to that order."
Mm.
Right? And just being also okay to check myself in that and giving that grace. So that's really the season that I'm pulling into of that reverting back into the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you said that because it is so countercultural when you decide to submit to your husband. It was so funny. My husband and I will be married in 3 years in April. And
Yay.
when we dated for like okay, dated because we never made it official. Dated for
Okay.
6 months ish. No, 3 months. October, November, December. Got engaged in December. January, February, March. We're married the first week of April.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was very Miss Independent, had moved from my Mississippi to Virginia, which is like 1,000 miles and 16 hours. And I was fresh out of college and it was not a nightmare, but I had to be Little Miss Independent very quickly.
Mhm.
Very, very quickly. And then I remember one of our mentors sitting me down, I think 2 weeks before my wedding, and was like, "How are you going to submit to your husband?" I was like, "I'm sorry. What?" Not that I
Yes.
knew that it was a foreign concept, but I guess my character in moving here was so different because I had to take care of myself. My parents weren't here, my family wasn't here. I was taking care of me. And I have absolutely no problem submitting to authority. I have no problem submitting to my husband at all. But I remember her sitting down on the couch and being like, "How are you going to submit to your husband?" I'm like, "Hold your horses. I know how to do
Yes.
this." But it's so funny that she felt the need to be like, "Hi, this is a thing the Bible says." I was like, "I get that." And that was a very awkward conversation, but we mastered it. And since then, she's like, "You do that really well." I was like, "Thank you." But it's so countercultural because even in the
Yeah.
church, there's people that are like, "What do you mean you have to go ask your husband if you can go out to dinner with us?"
Mhm.
What do you mean you can't pay $15 for this child's fundraiser thing? What do you mean this, that, and the I was like, "No, we have to talk about it. Like, it's
Yeah.
ours that the Lord is asking us to steward. And if I
Yes.
choose to make that decision, I take him out of the equation and that takes the Lord out of it. So we're gonna have to do something with that."
Exactly.
So I love that you
Exactly.
said that.
Yeah. It's so humbling. It's so humbling when you've been kind of molded into that other shape and also, like, praised in that avenue. and then coming back, and I also think it's strange because we've been together, it'll be 13 years in November.
That's
And
awesome.
so for this to be a new thing through such a long period, I feel like it's weird. Like, people are like, "Well, why didn't you start this way?" But we were so ignorant and not knowing. And I feel like that's the majority of the world. Like, we just don't know. We don't
Mhm.
know, and we trust because we know other people more than we know the Lord in that aspect, that we trust them over the unknown in the
Yep.
Lord in that. And so I think that's why I feel like so strange of saying this, because I'm like, man, it's been 13 years and now we're getting there. But I think that's the gold in it too, to give
Yeah.
other people permission. Like, it doesn't matter if you've been married for a little bit or a long time, we can always come back. That's what the Lord wants us to do. To
Yep.
be comfortable to come back to him, to be like, dude, I'm sorry, I've been getting this wrong, but thank you for your son, that I can come back and that you are making it clear to me of how to operate in this, and how that just flows so beautifully into everything else that
Mhm.
our hands are a part of, you know?
Absolutely. Do you have any practical tips on making that change, like, later? Because you've, like, established your marriage, you've established yourself, you've established yourself as a mom, and then you're changing that. So do you have any
Yeah.
practical tips on how to do that?
I would say communication, even when it's the most daunting thing to do, and being willing to being pliable of, it's okay if you're wrong. And
Mhm.
um the whole goal of this is, in a marriage you are one team, and
Yep.
so the whole goal is to bring you both closer to Jesus. So communication is key. Something that I have loved that my husband and I do is we meet weekly, and so we have weekly meetings, and sometimes it's twice a week. We have like a more of a, like, family meeting of, like, what's going on this week, and what are we gonna eat this week, and how do you wanna feel, and how can I love you better, and all of that kind of touch base. And then
Yeah.
we have the more difficult meetings of, okay, this is our finances, and this is where we are, and how are we doing here. But we put those in place so we didn't have an excuse, because we know that we should be talking about these things. And if you're not talking about them, then that also gives space for the enemy to just get you away from each other. But if you're like, nope, we want to steward, you said it, stewardship. God entrusted my husband to me,
Mhm.
right? And same vice versa. And so if we're not taking care of that gift, and I'm sorry, come on, an hour a week, like, we can do that to love on each other better and to be more prepared and equipped for what God has for us. So that would probably be my biggest tip, is like, sit down with each other on a weekly meeting. And if that's too much, do it monthly and then start and see where
Yeah.
that goes. But it was required for us to do that, to be on the same page and where we're going, and where God has us going together.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great practical tip and not hard. Like, but it's one thing you don't think about. You're like, "Oh, we probably should talk about this instead of keeping it all in my brain."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't allow room for assumption too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's hard.
Yeah.
I, like, felt that in my soul. I'm like, "Oh, this is why that first year and a half was so interesting." Um,
Yes. Yes.
anyway, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Was there a season where God seemed more focused on shaping your character than advancing your calling, and what did that form in you?
This is so great. I feel like submission is what it has formed in me. Submission and surrender. I thought it was so, like, cute a couple years ago. I remember an Instagram story that I posted. I was like, "Ugh, I'm in a season of surrender." And then God, like, smacked me in the face of, like, girl, this is daily. I don't know what you're talking about of season. No, it's daily. Like, from the moment we wake up, the day is his. Our life is his. And if that doesn't give you freedom, let's chat. Like, he gets free reign on where I go, what I say, what I do. And that has given me so much freedom, but it's a heart posture of surrender
Right.
and submission to him. And I think this question is unique in my sense because in that heart posture, I feel like we're always here. Like there's always something that's developing and in my character, and something that I've noticed that it's beautiful to take inventory of your life and to see your growth if you're
Mm.
looking for growth. And each year I put on a large women's conference in the fall. And I noticed about our second one, I was like, oh God, this is what you're doing. Oh, so we have a theme every year. And he walks me through our theme leading into the conference. And so I'm like, some of them I've been like, yay. And then some of them like, I don't want to walk through that, God. Last year was It Is Written, and it was all about the wilderness and sitting in that. And I was like, in about March, our conference is in September. About March, I was like, yep, you have me walking through this. So then what I teach and what we share is valid. And we've walked through it. So then we can be case studies to people,
Mhm.
not experts, but case studies of like, been through it, know what that's like. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so this surrendered and submissive heart to the Father, I think, is just a showcase of like our daily testimonies, right? You don't have one testimony, your whole life and moments of testimonies. I have so many in different areas of my life. And I feel like God gives us those for certain people or certain instances, but when we're fully surrendered, we can realize like he's always building our character. And I mean, he's given us the word to see his character in all of it, so then we can be a reflection of that. And so I feel like in all things that I'm doing, if I'm going through a hard season, I can't you can't focus on the circumstance, right? I'm like, Lord, I pray this all the time. Will you smack me in the face of the teaching moment here, of the lesson that you're birthing out of this? Because something good is in this. I am struggling to see it, but can you just put it right here? And he's good to do that. He's really good to swift kick me all the time. And I love him for it. Because that's what I want. Like people want clarity, pray for him to smack you in the face with it, and he will, you know? And so that's what, like in the building of character, is realizing every season he's building something within you,
Mhm.
and we get to be entrusted with looking at that to discover the gold. Like, what did he do in that season? What did he do in this season? um and another tip I would say, if you're having a hard time with this, of like, I know what he's doing, ask somebody what you're reflecting. And this might be
Yeah.
hard, this could be difficult, but like ask someone else, what do you see in me in this season that I'm going through? But that could also pull that out, so then you can get smacked in the face or gently nudged in it of like, actually, I see your resilience and you could be feeling something else and it could come alongside and help you in that. But I feel like God's always working on me in something, in preparation, but in that inventory, really reflecting into our conferences, I'm like, oh yeah, this is what he's doing it for, to bring us out so people can really see, you know, this is real life. And he does this in real time with his daughters. And if I didn't live it, I wouldn't be able to give it justice in sharing it to other people, you know?
Right.
It's real humbling.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And I think a lot of times we hear these people that like have conferences because I'm like, oh, I want to do that when I grow up. When I grow up.
Yes.
Or like we're small people and you see people on TV and you're like, oh, they have such a great message. And then we forget, for them to have that message, they had to struggle through some stuff.
Yes.
The Lord had to teach them some crazy things that they probably didn't want to learn.
Yes.
And so when we realize that they're people just like we are, like we put our pants on the same way. Sometimes we fall over putting them on, but we all put them on the same way. every
Mhm.
morning. And when we realize we're people and the Lord is teaching all of us different things, but the same thing, but like we're all waiting for Him to reveal what He's teaching us. I think it's really cool that we can relate to each other in those seasons because it makes us more human, but then it forms community in us so that we can seek Jesus together instead of feeling isolated. I mean, He calls us to community. So I think it's
Yes.
so amazing that the Lord gets to take you through those seasons, even though they're not fun sometimes,
Yes.
because you get to stand on stage and be like, okay, I've gone through this. Who else has done this? And they're like, oh, yeah, we can chat about it instead of me being like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. That's not helpful.
Yeah. And I think he's also put us in a place to call that out in people, to be
Yes.
like, "Yes, you're right. You're not alone. We're we're all going through our own things, but let me show you where God is in this."
Yeah,
Like, don't go in your sinkhole and be isolated where the enemy wants to meet you there, right?
absolutely.
God is forming and shaping, and it's required for us to be that clay, to be the pliable. And sometimes that takes the being okay with the pushing and the
Mhm.
moving. And that's what I feel like He's called me to personally of like, I want you to air it all out. I want people to know what you're doing, how hard it is. You know, all the stories that most people are like, "Don't say that." Like, why would you share this with people? But God's called us to freedom. And if
Mhm.
we don't act that out, if we don't share that of what that looks like, people would think that Christianity is easy
Yep.
and following the Lord is easy, but it comes at a cost.
Yes.
And the cost is our comfort. The
Mhm.
cost is, you know, yeah, me going through some crappy stuff in order to have a great experience to call people forward in their own, right? But I wouldn't trade it for a thing. I'm reading Leviticus right now, and I think we got it pretty easy. Um, in what we have to do.
Yep.
Thank you, Jesus, literally.
Mhm.
But it's such a gift, and being able to help people reframe their mind to see the gifts that we have and to take action into that because eternity is happening right now.
Mhm.
And I don't want to lose any time. And sometimes I got to be called forward in that. And I know that other people have to. So that's kind of why God's pushed that on my heart. But yeah, it's a humbling process to be molded and shaped and sculpted.
Yeah, but there's a pretty result, just it's
Yeah.
not pretty in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
Not pretty in the middle. The result's pretty
Yeah.
after you've been fired and glazed and fired again. Yeah, mhm,
Yeah.
it's a great
Hmm.
analogy. Um, painful analogy, but great analogy.
Yes.
I have another question for us. So, what
Perfect.
have you had to release, whether that's your expectations, timelines, or your identity, in order to become who God is inviting you to be now?
I feel like it's all of that and above. Like we get to release expectations. I, God really put it on my heart to share today of releasing people. And that was really hard for me. You would think when you're partnered with the Lord and you're doing what God's called you to do, that people would just like stay and love you and da da da. No,
Oh.
I don't know what it is. If I have something tattooed on my forehead that's like, hurt me or like leave me, you know what I mean? But I've had to release so many relationships, friendships that I thought would be long term. And that's been so hurtful when community is your calling,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And when God's called you to something higher and people don't want to go there with you, and sometimes your spouse too, of, God's still working on them. I heard a beautiful analogy of like an elevator, and God's called you to a specific floor, but He hasn't called everyone to that floor. And you're going to have people coming off the elevator as you're going up, and you're going to have people coming on the elevator. But to like loose those expectations of who gets to be on it
Mhm.
with you and to not stay because of it. like Lot's wife, of looking back and longing for, I thought we would always be here. I thought we would always have this, but letting Jesus be our focus and not our past and not our friendships, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that's where God really wanted me to land all of it, really, to release and let go of, because we have to make space for God to move. But to be expectant without expectations, right? So we can be expectant for God to move and to trust and have faith, without us being like, I just think of Noah. Like, Noah never had seen rain, right? And how for him to be expectant of, like, God's going to provide a flood, because why else would I build this huge boat, right? But to release the expectation of how and when and what it looks like, in letting our trust be louder than those expectations.
Mhm. And I think that's a very practical, very difficult, very practical thing, because when we release those expectations, then we actually get to listen to the Lord more clearly. Because when we
Yeah.
put the Lord in a box, he can't move outside the box. And
Yeah.
he wants to. He has much greater plans than we could ever come up with or dream or
Yeah.
even like watch on TV. Like there are things that we
Yeah.
cannot even fathom that he wants to do in our lives, but because we're like,
Yeah.
you can work in these confines. This is
Yes.
it. This is the only way you get to work, and it has to go this way. And when
Yes.
we put the Lord in those, not that we can physically put the Lord, but when we
Yeah.
like don't allow the Lord to work in us, we miss the
Mhm.
blessing. We miss it.
100%. Yep.
And it's just wild because it's so easy to say that, yeah, I'm not putting the Lord in a box until you voice an expectation you have and you're like, hey, cool, that it can only go this way. But the Lord's like, no, it can go about 17 other ways. Let me do this one over here. And it's like, but I don't know the end to that one. I can't see the end to
Yes.
that one.
Yes. And that's where our faith comes in, right? Of,
Mm-hmm.
like, our faith is in the even if, not the what if.
Yep.
So even if that box gets demolished, even if
Mhm.
it doesn't turn out a certain way, it's still let God, it's still his,
Yep.
right? He will still anoint it, bless it, give it whatever. And also to free people of this too, so it's not so black and white. I listened to his sermon, and it was like, God can still use stupid. And that, like, freed me so much, because sometimes we can have, some people can be so like, oh my gosh, I'm going to mess it up. I'm not going to do it this way. And I don't want to put them in a box. And I don't want to, like, what do I do? And get overwhelmed by that. But
Uh-huh.
that shouldn't, like, hold us back from taking action, and knowing that even if we miss here, or we action, God can work with. God can move and he can change. Inaction is disobedience. He
Mm-hmm.
can't move if we're not willing and able to go and do. And so, just to free someone in, like, the steps of, like, if go and do, God will bless, and he can turn and move. He doesn't, his path isn't only a, right?
Yeah.
Like, he is bigger than that, to use. But yeah, it it's such a blessing. And I think that inventory, and just being really honest with ourselves of, like, where am I? What's he calling out of me, that can help direct you. But it requires us to come back to ourselves, to be like, checking in with ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a good segue to talking about action versus inaction to compare it
Mhm.
to waiting. A lot of times we talk about waiting and we think of it as a passive sense. So Rihanna sits on couch, eats peanut butter blossom cookies, and then watches television for 2 days or 2 months or whenever I decide to get up. That would
Yeah.
be passive. That is not good for me. Now, occasionally, maybe for a couple hours, but not for
Yeah.
days or like weeks or months. Then we have
Yes.
active waiting, that we're doing something while waiting on the Lord to direct the next step. And I loved how you said that action was obedience or inaction is disobedience. I read it as
Yes.
action is obedience. And so we talk about waiting and we get confused by it because we're like, eh. And in reality, the Lord's doing all the work in us while we're waiting. We're never going to reach a destination until we're with Him.
Yeah.
So in this season, how are you waiting well? How are you keeping up with the action of what the Lord has asked you to do?
I got so humbled this morning with a friend. I just messaged her. I was like, I just need some prayer in this one area. This is how I'm feeling. And she was like, I heard from this one awesome woman of like, just take the next step.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh, I say that all the time." And I was like, "Thank you for humbling me in my own, like, wisdom that God's given me." But, a lot of times we get caught up in in our mind of like, "Oh, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing like, what do I do, God? You've called me to sit and be still. You've called me to wait. You've called me to, like, not until this to happen," right? And like you said, that doesn't mean to sit and not do anything. Um, I had a pendulum. He gave me a vision of a pendulum one time of like literally one side, you're like not doing anything. And then the other side, it's all you're doing is your works, but you're not allowing him to work within you. It's all
Mhm.
by your hand, right? And so, like, how do we find this medium? How do we find it's okay to rest because he calls us to do that. And sometimes in the rest, he'll speak to us of what comes next.
Mhm.
But we don't want to stay there. So how do we move into action of that? And so in what my friend was telling me, it's what is one next step? And sometimes in our mind, we think, oh my gosh, if God's called you to do a conference, I've got to go talk to 200 people to buy a ticket, right? And we think that's the next step. But actually, maybe the next step is admitting, like, God's called me to do a conference, Lord, and then pray into it. Maybe it's emailing a speaker. Maybe it is going and searching online for a venue, like making it smaller than what our mind is telling us, but taking that next step. And another thing that I think helps is if we don't know that next step of going back of like, what was the last step that God's given us? What was the last call that He had on our heart? And maybe that's unfinished. And what does it look like to just keep acting on that one until comes in and says, okay, now this, right? And sometimes we want to fast track. We want the fast pass at Disney. You know what I mean? So we
Uh-huh.
want to be like, okay, I talked to one person. I prayed for them. What's next? Instead, maybe he was like, I want you to develop this habit of coming to me and submitting to me. Can I give you a story? I
Yes.
think this will go well with this. Um, I had to go deliver a check to bless someone with at a Starbucks. I haven't been to the Starbucks in probably 2 years. Um, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to go here. On my way, I feel this nudge of you're going to pray for someone and you need to be ready to pray with a random person and ask them. And I'm like, okay, you got me going to Starbucks where not most people that go to Starbucks want prayer, right? Or like are very opening arms to God, right? So I'm
Uh-huh.
just like, okay, God, all right. So I go to the Starbucks and then I'm sitting waiting for my friend to come and I'm just scrolling and I see this video of um obedience in prayer and how do you go pray with someone like that you don't know. And she gave 3 steps. You do this, you do this, you do this. And I was like, "Oh my gosh. God's really wanting me to go pray with someone right now." And so I felt it so convicted. And my friend she texted me, she's like, "I'm running 10 minutes late." And I was like, "Great. That means I gotta go in here and pray." And I'm saying this to say, like, a lot of people have thoughts of like, "Oh, you're leading this." This is an active struggle of being obedient sometimes to being uncomfortable. So I go into Starbucks. I asked them if I can put a flyer up on their wall. And then I said, "This is so random." I say this to all the people. I said, "I know this is random and you don't have to take me up on it. But can I pray for anybody? Does anyone need prayer?" And 2 girls were like, "Absolutely not. Do not look at me." And then the manager said, "Give me a minute." And so I stand back and then he comes to me, he was like, "Would love some prayer." And I said, "Anything specific?" And he goes, "Nope." And so I just pray over him. Um, And then I was like, "In Jesus' name, I pray, amen." And he goes, "Keep doing God's work. That was strong and that was courageous. Keep going. That is so bold for you to come in here and do that." And then I walked out of there and I felt in my spirit, "Good job. Way to listen." And I felt like God was testing me.
Yeah.
Right? And so sometimes in the waiting, God's just testing you to build up your gift, to build up who you are, to build up your relationship with Him for the outcome, for the call, right? All He wants us to do is be obedient. He just
Mhm.
wants a relationship with us. And so if it looks like sitting on your couch, to watch a show, to rest, to be in a state of receiving,
Mhm.
that's where he wants us. He doesn't want us to be consumed and distracted, but he wants us to be postured to receive that next step or active in the step that he's already called us. But I just thought that that was a great story of like active submission just in a test season, not that guy didn't need nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I feel like God was just like, I'm testing her, so just allow her to do it. You know? So, it's good.
Yeah,
Good
that is good.
practice.
And it you're more inclined to listen to the Lord when you know what he sounds like and when you're
Yeah.
willing to obey what he asked you to do, and that builds that repetitiveness in you. So when he asks you to
Yes.
do something bigger, he can trust you with it because you
Yes.
walked into a random Starbucks and prayed for a random dude because he
Yes.
told you to. It wasn't
Yes.
like you changed the world or, fed the
Yes.
homeless or anything
Yes.
wild. You just
Yes.
prayed because that's what you do to the Lord. Like, that's just
Yes.
101. You're gonna talk to him. So I love that.
Yes.
I think that's really cool. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you wanted to share with our listeners today?
I just wanna encourage anyone that's in this waiting season, like, if you're in this wilderness season, that this is a part of his plan too.
Mhm.
And a lot of times we can get discouraged in the wait, but if we can reframe that of God, what do you have for me in this? And really seek him in it. There's so much beauty in that, in finding that joy, and that we have
Mhm.
access to that even in the waiting, even in the hard times. We That's the countercultural part of we can have joy and sorrow.
Yep.
Right? And so I just wanna encourage, anyone that's in that holding pattern that's like, "When are we gonna touch down? And what landing strip is it gonna be on?" Right? Um, to just encourage you to continue to seek God, but know that you still have access to the fruit of the Spirit in it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That was a good word. Thank you for sharing.
Amen. Yeah.
Thank you so much for jumping on our podcast. You're amazing. Can you tell our listeners where to connect with you?
Yes, anywhere that there's a social platform, I am most likely on. So, really, Instagram and Facebook is where I kind of hone in. If you go to our Instagram, you can find we have our own app. And so, God really put it on our heart to have our own app so we can keep people focused on Him and not like distracted by, the world and its problems, but focused on Him and what He has for us. So, you can find us there. We have a series that shifts every season, and it's called Holy Girl Program. And so we just do, right now, we're in Holy Girl Haven for the winter, and then we'll go into Holy Girl Bloom. And so we just have fun and exciting things for leaders to pour into them. And so you can find us, get a word of encouragement. We have all kinds of things that we're doing all the time so you can get plugged in with us and we can get poured into you because we want to pour into people so that we can overflow in what God has for everyone else. And so it's really put on our heart to fuel up our leaders to be in
Mhm.
that state of overflow so God can move through his people through us. Yeah.
Love that. Love it so much. We're gonna link the links to all of those things. I was like, "We're gonna link
Perfect.
what?" We're gonna put all of those links in the show notes, so be sure to scroll down if you don't know where the show notes are, my friends. If you are on Spotify and or YouTube, because 'cause they're both videos and you got to watch our lovely faces, there's 3 dots on Spotify, and then YouTube is just like a caption in the comments. Apple Podcasts, I haven't figured out yet. So I know a lot of you listen via Apple Podcasts. It's there because I know it's there because I have to check it, but I don't know
Mhm.
what button to click. So if you know how to do that, you should message me. Otherwise, if you would, can you follow Emily on Instagram and tell her thank you so much for joining our podcast? She's amazing. And then go follow all the Fuel Buffet things because you
Yes.
need to get in on all of that. It's very good.
Yes.
And they have their conference in the fall. So if you're close enough and or want to fly, please go jump in on their
Please
conference in the
come.
fall.
Yes.
It would be so much fun. Well, it has been a joy and a privilege. Thank you so much for jumping on, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye, friends. Thanks for listening to the Not Just Waiting podcast. I hope today reminded you that even in the in-between, God is working, and you are not alone. If this episode encouraged you, would you share it with a friend? And don't forget to hit follow so you never miss a moment of truth, hope, and real conversation. You can find me on Instagram at rihanna.ivy.hoff and join the community over on Substack for deeper reflections and weekly encouragement. Until next time, take heart, friend. God is in the waiting with you.